This wasn't even the video I was originally going to make, but after spending my entire day recalculating all my Aoife stuff, what did they do to this character? I am actually just speechless. I don't even know where to begin. This video isn't even going to be scripted, by the way. I'm just going to ramble, and I do have my calculations so I can talk about them too, but you've probably already seen them if you saw my community posts. Also, I made a post on Aoife memes about it, so you could have seen it there, and they also spread on Twitter like wildfire. Also, slightly off topic, I'm happy that my calcs slang for calculator are being shared, but if you are going to share them, please give me credit. I'm not that big of a creator yet, so sharing my videos goes a long way, and I guess I'll just do my cringy ass intro now. Hello there, Flip here, and today we're going to be talking about the Aoife version 3 changes, how much they impact his gameplay, and then I'm just going to be ranting about why I'm upset with how they've handled Aoife's kit. But before we do that, as always, if at any point during the video you're entertained or informed, make sure to drop a like and even consider subscribing, as I talk on various topics regarding Genshin's meta, and I'll try to keep you updated. Shout out to all my lovely channel members, I appreciate the support, and with that, let's begin. So Aoife's kit is very simple. He is basically just Mizuki again. I made an entire video breaking down his kit in more detail, but for the basics, his skill makes fly up in the air, and he can swirl a bunch of times, and he increases reaction damage bonus for both electrocharged and swirls. And then his burst is an Onimo nuke, and his constellations just facilitate his driving playstyle, except for one thing being a C6, but we'll get to that. So if you're wondering what the changes are, what most people saw is that they buffed his constellation too, and they also clarified that when he heals it is team-wide, which was already known but it wasn't shown in the text. And in regards to the C2 change, they just made the reaction damage bonus stronger, which is like a 2000 damage per rotation increase on each character that triggers electrocharged. It isn't a lot. Reaction damage bonus scales like shit, but it is a buff, I guess. So you may be thinking with that, oh well, how was he nerfed then if his C2 was buffed and they clarified his healing? And you would be right in thinking that, but what a lot of people don't know is that the English and Chinese beta clients are slightly different. Well, I don't know if different is the right word, but sometimes there can be a difference in the CN and EN betas, or the English is just missing some stuff, in which almost 100% of the time now the CN has the most accurate information, and usually after a week the CN changes get added to the EN beta, in which on the CN side, Aoife C6 was actually reworked. So how Aoife C6 worked before in both version 1 and 2 is that when you held down his normal attacks to fire his gunshots, there was a 50% chance that Kakuku would shoot out an additional bullet. And as stated in the text, this bullet would do 120% of his normal attack's original damage, so essentially a 1.2 times multiplier. So if Aoife was to fire a bullet that does 100 damage, there's a 50% chance that an additional bullet that does 120 damage would come out. Aoife fires 12 bullets and it's a 50% chance to come out, so on average this would be like adding 6 more shots to his combos for free. In fact, it would be more than 6 because the bullets do 20% more damage. But now in the Chinese version 3 beta update, this has now been changed. Instead of the C6 hits doing 1.2 times more damage, the damage of Aoife's C6 hits are now based on 120% of Aoife's attack. And I don't really know how to explain this in a casual way, but like if you open the talent menu and look at the scalings of abilities, that's basically what his C6 is now. And now the question that would naturally follow is, okay, is 120% of Aoife's attack a good scaling? And no, it is not. Using Aoife himself as reference, this is lower scaling than his level 1 elemental skill normal attack talent. This 120% MV is half of what his normal attacks are at level 10. So his C6 went from firing bullets that are 20% stronger than his normal ones to firing bullets that are half as strong as his normal ones. So they reduced the effectiveness of his C6 by more than half. Now I am going to get into the calculation portion of the video now, in which for Aoife's driving teams where he builds full elemental mastery and is just a swirl and electrocharge trigger, this realistically doesn't change a whole lot for these teams. They should still be as good as they are. But with Aoife C6 in version 2 and 1, you could actually build him as a DPS with crit pieces using Obsidian Codex, and it actually wasn't horrible. You could either play him as a hyper carry using Bennett and Yonton to hyper buff his damage with C6 Farzlon, or you could play him on a hybrid team, which is my favorite team for him, as it combined both his driving role as well as his DPS role. And this was only really possible at C6 because of how much it boosted his damage. His numbers were on par with some of Wanderer's best teams, so it's not like it was anything game breaking. It was just a nice playstyle that Aoife mains could run if they were eventually to get C6. And in my opinion, because of how badly just pure reaction-based teams scale, his hybrid teams are probably going to be his best teams if you're to vertically invest into him, as getting something like Wriothesley's signature to buff his hybrid teams would give you a much bigger increase than getting Mizuki's signature for driving teams. And things like Furina constellations also scale better on a crit DPS. But now with these changes, those dreams are dead. He has lost 10,000 DPS. The gap between his driving teams and his other teams are just so massive that it's not even worth really considering. This is like the single biggest nerf I have seen in a Genshin beta, and it's just so confusing because why? We have a Escoffier running around with literally everything in her kit, but Aoife can't be a mid Onimo DPS, and I get the sentiment from a lot of people that's like, okay, but who cares, no one was going to play him as an Onimo carry. But at the same time, I feel like that's also kind of short-sighted, because if it didn't matter anyways, then there was no point in making the change regardless. This just fucked over the people excited for Aoife for basically no real reason, because it's not even like they made his driving teams any better, they're still giving the same performance. And I'm also tired of hearing the 4-star excuse when Eonson literally just came out, Auroron came out and is an amazing 4-star. Lanyon is the best shielder in the game at Constellation 2. Gaming is one of the best DPSs in the game and he's also a 4-star. I'm sorry, I just don't buy this 4-star bias because the 4-stars have been pretty good for a while. Even Kachina on her release before we got Shalonin was a very real recommendation for like Navia and Nivelette teams. And the reason I was so excited for Aoife compared to other Onimo drivers is that this would actually give him a niche. Looking at his hybrid teams again, he's able to be a good Onimo driver while also putting out very solid numbers of his own, which is something no other Onimo driver can really do. But now he still at least is the best Onimo driver theoretically, but he has nothing else really that separates him from everyone else. He's just became so much more of a boring character now. And the last thing I've heard about his C6 that people are using to try justify it is that it was always like this, and that we just interpreted his C6 wrong. But like, if you just read the C6, there is literally no other way to interpret this but a 1.2 times damage multiplier. If they were making a separate motion value for his C6, it would not mention the tonic shot damage. It would have just mentioned that it scales off of Aoife's attack, but it doesn't do that. For reference, let's take a look at Shaska's Ascension 4, which has the exact same wording as Aoife's Constellation 6, and it's a multiplier. So unless it was just mistranslated for the EN side, there's no other way to interpret this. But if we want to assume this was always a 120% motion value, then this constellation makes no sense. Why are we giving a 120% attack MV to a character with one of the lowest base attacks in the game? Aoife and Auroron were designed to work together, so why does Auroron C6 give a 30% attack buff to a character that doesn't care about their talent damage and only cares about their reaction damage? Why give Aoife one of the highest scaling elemental bursts in the game that only primarily does damage if his reaction damage was always going to be the priority? Why even give him additional hits in the first place that doesn't help his driving playstyle? I guess to be more fair, his C6 does increase his Onoma application and also improves his healing, but if this was the goal to just improve his healing at Onoma application, I can think of 20 better ways to do that, because even with the C6, his healing is still bad. Even if the intent was to always be a 120% motion value, which I don't really buy, it's still a horrible constellation regardless, and doesn't do much for his driving teams. In a game where Eonson C6 makes her the de facto best buffer for any Natlin attack scaling carry, Gaming gets 80 crit value, Auroron is able to pass on a 30% attack buff while buffing his own damage and get an additional hit that actually does something. Chevreuse gives up to a 60% pyro or electro damage bonus, but again, Aoife's C6 was too much apparently. Let's not even talk about the fact that all of the characters I just mentioned are better than him at the base. I actually just don't get it. They just made Aoife an extremely boring character now, and I feel bad for his mains. Aoife now has one team, guys. I hope you really enjoy playing it, and I don't think we'll see a nerf as big as this for the rest of Genshin's lifespan. But with that, thank you guys so much for watching. I think I ranted enough. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts on Aoife, as I would love to hear it and respond to almost every single comment. Channel members, I love you. The support means the world to me. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys on the flip side. Peace.